She stood in the center of the ballroom, wearing a $20 dress while her mother-in-law laughed, pointing a manicured finger at her plain shoes. The Sterling family thought they had broken her. They thought Ilara was nothing more than a mistake, a poverty-stricken nobody who had trapped their son into a marriage he didn't deserve. They spent 3 years mocking her silence, mistaking her patience for weakness. But they forgot one crucial rule of high society. Real wealth doesn't scream, it whispers. And when the auctioneer read out the name of the mysterious buyer who just purchased their family's debt, the room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. You are not going to believe who signed the check. The sound of silver fork tines scraping against fine bone china was the only thing louder than the silence in the dining room. It was a suffocating silence, the kind that felt heavy, laden with unsaid insults and practiced judgment. Ilara sat at the far end of the mahogany table, her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing her favorite beige cardigan, a wool blend she'd picked up at a terrifyingly crowded thrift store in downtown Seattle 3 years ago. It was comfortable, it was warm, and in the Sterling household, it was practically a declaration of war. "So," Victoria Sterling said, her voice cutting through the air like a diamond cutter on glass. She didn't look up from her plate of seared scallops. "Jessica tells me you're still driving that vehicle, Ilara." Ilara looked up, meeting the icy blue gaze of her mother-in-law. Victoria was a woman who had never known a day of discomfort in her 60 years. She was draped in a silk blouse that cost more than Ilara's supposed annual salary, and her fingers were weighed down by sapphires. "It runs well, Victoria," Ilara said softly. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered a familiar, nervous rhythm against her ribs. "It gets me from point A to point B. So does a donkey." Jessica, Ilara's sister-in-law, chimed in. She sat to Victoria's right, the golden child of the Sterling dynasty. Jessica was beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, like a sleek sports car that would run you over if you stood in the driveway too long. She took a sip of her Chardonnay, her eyes crinkling with amusement. "Honestly, Mark, it's embarrassing. I saw her parking that rusted Honda outside the country club yesterday. The valet actually asked if she was delivering Uber Eats." A ripple of laughter went around the table. Even Richard, the patriarch, let out a low, rumbling chuckle before wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. Ilara looked at her husband, Mark. Mark Sterling was handsome, with the kind of jawline that sold luxury watches and a smile that usually charmed investors. But tonight, as was the case on most nights at his parents' estate in the Hamptons, his spine seemed to dissolve. He swirled his wine, avoiding Ilara's eyes. "It is a bit of an eyesore, Elle," Mark muttered, finally looking at her with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Maybe we should just lease you a Mercedes. Mum's right. It reflects poorly on the firm." "I like my car," Ilara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And we agreed we were saving money for the house renovations." "The renovations on that cottage?" Victoria scoffed, placing her fork down with a deliberate clink. "Oh, honey, you don't renovate a shack, you bulldoze it. But I suppose you're used to rustic living, given your background." The background comment. It was their favorite weapon. The Sterlings knew very little about Ilara Vance. They knew she had met Mark at a coffee shop in Boston. They knew she worked as a freelance copy editor. They knew she had no parents to speak of, having grown up in the foster system. To them, she was a blank slate of poverty that Mark had inexplicably fallen in love with. They saw her thrifted clothes, her lack of jewelry, and her refusal to indulge in spa days, and they categorized her. The gold digger who wasn't even good at digging. "I happen to like the cottage," Ilara said, taking a sip of water. "It has character. It has termites, Jessica shot back. But look, if you're asking for a handout to fix the roof, just say so. Daddy can write a check. We know that's why you're really here every Friday night. Jessica, Mark warned, but it was weak. Don't start. I'm just saying what we're all thinking. Jessica threw her hands up, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the chandelier's light. We're trying to secure the merger with the DuPont family next month. Image is everything, Mark. You can't bring her to the gala wearing that. She gestured vaguely at Ilara's entire existence. She looks like she's about to ask if we have any recycling to take out. Ilara felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't shame, though they thought it was. It was a simmering, volcanic rage that she had been capping for 3 years. She remembered the day she met Mark. He had been different then. Or maybe he had just been playing a role. He had seemed kind, interested in her mind, not her status. But slowly, the gravity of the Sterling name had pulled him back into their orbit. He was terrified of being cut off from the family trust, terrified of disappointing Victoria, and to keep his peace, he sacrificed his wife. I will wear something appropriate for the gala, Ilara said, her voice firming up. Victoria laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Appropriate. Darling, unless you're wearing a gown by Alexander McQueen or Versace, you're invisible. But don't worry, I have an old dress of Jessica's in the attic. It's a few seasons old and might be tight in the hips, but it's better than whatever. Polyester blend you're currently eyeing at the discount store. Ilara gripped her napkin under the table. She thought about the phone call she had taken just an hour ago in the guest bathroom. The acquisition is complete, Miss Vance, the voice on the other end had said. It was Harrison Thorne, her senior attorney, and the managing partner of Thorne and Associates, one of the most feared law firms in New York. The board is ready to announce the new majority shareholder on Monday, but they are pressing for a name. They are getting restless. Not yet, Harrison, she had whispered, checking the door to ensure no one was listening. Let them sweat. I'll sign the papers after the Sterling Gala. As you wish. But, are you sure about the purchase? The Sterling holdings are volatile. I'm not buying it for the profit, Harrison. I'm buying it for the lesson. Back at the table, the insults continued. By the way, Richard spoke up, his voice booming. I looked into that little investment advice you gave Mark last week, Ilara. Ilara paused. She had casually mentioned to Mark that a small biotech firm in San Diego, Novus Gen, was showing promising clinical trials. Oh? Ilara asked. Complete rubbish, Richard dismissed, waving a hand. Penny stocks, gambling. I told Mark to pull everything out and put it into Omnicorp like a sensible man. Leave the finance to the big boys, sweetheart. Stick to. What is it you do? Correcting grammar. Ilara took a bite of a scallop. It was cold. Actually, she said, Novus Gen just received FDA approval this afternoon. Their stock closed up 400%. The table went silent for a split second. Mark looked at Ilara, eyes wide. Wait, really? I sold it this morning because Dad said it was a fluke, Richard snapped, his face turning a shade of crimson. Beginner's luck. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Don't look so smug, girl. I'm not smug, Richard, Ilara said calmly. I just read. You read gossip columns, Victoria interjected, sensing her husband's irritation and moving to crush the rebellion. Now, let's discuss the gala. It's the 50th anniversary of Sterling Enterprises. The entire board of directors will be there. And more importantly, the CEO of Vance Global might make an appearance. Ilara choked slightly on her water. She coughed, covering her mouth with her napkin. You okay there? Jessica sneered. Did the water go down the wrong pipe? Or are you just allergic to the mention of real money? Vance Global? Ilara managed to ask, clearing her throat. Yes, Mark said, his eyes lighting up with a reverence he never showed her. They're the shadow group that's been buying up tech and logistics companies all over the coast. No one knows who runs it. Rumor is it's some reclusive genius from Silicon Valley or a Saudi prince. If we can get Vance Global to invest in Sterling Enterprises, we're set for life. We save the company. Save the company? Ilara asked sharply. I thought business was booming. Richard slammed his hand on the table. Business is fine. It's just liquidity, cash flow. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand. Ilara understood perfectly. She knew Sterling Enterprises was leveraged to the hilt. She knew they were borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. She knew this because she owned the bank that held their secondary mortgage. Well, Victoria said, signaling the servers to clear the plates. Let's just hope the Vance representative doesn't take one look at our family portrait and think we're running a charity shelter because of someone's choice of attire. She stared directly at Ilara. Don't worry, Victoria, Ilara said, a small cryptic smile finally touching her lips. I have a feeling this gala is going to be a night none of us will ever forget. I doubt that, Jessica muttered. You'll probably fall asleep in the corner. Ilara didn't respond. She just mentally moved a chess piece on the board in her mind. Check. The week leading up to the gala was a masterclass in humiliation. Because the Sterling family was generous, they insisted Ilara accompany them to the pre-gala charity auction held at the St. Regis. It was a mandatory family appearance, Victoria had declared. Ilara stood in the grand foyer of the hotel, feeling the familiar ache in her feet. She was wearing a simple black dress, one she had actually bought retail for $50, but next to Jessica's shimmering gold Dior gown, Ilara looked like part of the catering staff. In fact, 2 guests had already handed her their empty champagne flutes. Mark was busy schmoozing with a senator in the corner, leaving Ilara to fend for herself. Well, look who decided to come out of her hole! A voice, dripping with faux sweetness, sounded from behind her. It was Courtney, Jessica's best friend, and a woman whose plastic surgery budget could fund a small nation's military. Hello, Courtney, Ilara said pleasantly. Jessica told me you're still working, Courtney said, scanning Ilara up and down with visible disdain. Freelance, right? That's so brave in this economy. I mean, most wives in our circle just run foundations, but good for you for actually laboring. I enjoy working, Ilara said. It keeps the mind sharp. I suppose, Courtney laughed. Oh, look, they're auctioning off that vintage emerald necklace. Jessica is dying for it. Richard promised he'd bid on it for her. The group moved into the auction hall. The Sterlings had a prime table at the front. Ilara was seated at the very edge, practically in the aisle, next to a deaf elderly aunt who kept shouting about the soup. The auctioneer, a man with a perfectly groomed moustache, took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, lot number 45, the Tears of the Ocean Emerald Necklace. Starting bid is $50,000. Paddles shot up. The wealth in the room was palpable. It smelled of leather, old perfume, and entitlement. 60,000. 70. Richard Sterling raised his paddle. 80,000. He beamed at Jessica, who squealed in delight. Do I hear 90? The auctioneer asked. 90,000, came a voice from the back. It was a rival developer, Thomas Kincaid. Richard's jaw tightened. He hated losing. 100,000. 110, Kincaid countered. Richard hesitated. Ilara watched him closely. She knew the Sterling financials better than he did. He didn't have the liquid cash for this. He was bidding on ego. Dad, don't let him beat us, Jessica hissed. I need that necklace for the gala." "120,000! Richard shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. 130, Kincaid said smoothly. Richard slammed his paddle down. "Too rich for a piece of glass," he muttered, trying to save face. Jessica looked like she was about to cry. She turned her venom on Ilara. "What are you looking at?" Jessica snapped. "At least my father tries. What has your family ever given you? A history of bad credit?" Ilara turned her gaze to the stage. The necklace was stunning. Art Deco, platinum setting, Colombian emeralds. 130,000 going once, the auctioneer intoned. Ilara felt a vibration in her clutch. It was a text from Harrison. "Market closed. The transfer is finalized. You have full access to the liquidity pool." Ilara looked at the necklace. Then she looked at Jessica's sneering face. She didn't raise a paddle. She didn't have one. They hadn't registered her. But she raised her hand. The auctioneer paused. He squinted against the spotlight. "I'm sorry, madam, in the back, do you have a bid?" The entire table turned to stare at Ilara. Victoria looked horrified. Mark looked like he was about to vomit. "Ilara, put your hand down," Victoria hissed loudly. "My God, you're drunk! Someone get her water!" "She's humiliating us," Jessica groaned, burying her face in her hands. "She thinks this is a game." "Madam?" the auctioneer asked again. 200,000, Ilara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The room gasped. A collective intake of breath. Richard's eyes bulged. "Ilara, have you lost your mind? You can't pay for that. Sit down before I have security escort you out." "She's delusional," Mark whispered, grabbing her arm. "Ilara, stop. You have $300 in your checking account. What are you doing?" 200,000, Ilara repeated, pulling her arm away from Mark. She looked directly at the auctioneer. "Do I win?" The auctioneer looked confused. He looked at the Sterlings, who were frantically shaking their heads. "No." Then he looked at the rival bidder, Kincaid. Kincaid laughed. "I'm not bidding against a crazy woman. Let her have it. Let's see the check bounce." "Sold. For $200,000 to the lady in the beige wrap." The auctioneer banged the gavel. The silence that followed was excruciating. Victoria was purple with rage. "You stupid, insolent girl," Victoria spat, standing up. "Do you have any idea what you've done? When they come to collect, don't point them to us. We aren't paying a dime for your insanity. Mark, take her home, immediately, and call a doctor." An auction official approached the table, a clipboard in hand. "Congratulations, ma'am. If you could just provide your payment details." "She doesn't have it," Jessica screamed. "She's a broke nobody. Just cancel the bid." Ilara stood up slowly. She reached into her thrift store purse. She didn't pull out the joint debit card she shared with Mark, the one with the strict allowance Victoria monitored. She pulled out a black card. It was heavy. Titanium. There were no numbers on it, just a small etched chip and a signature. It was the Centurion card, but a tier above what even Richard had seen. It was the Black Lotus invitation-only card issued to clients with a net worth exceeding 9 figures. She handed it to the official. "Run it," she said. Richard saw the card. He froze. He had seen pictures of that card in Forbes, but he had never seen one in person. His brain couldn't process it. He assumed it was a fake. "I'm so sorry," Mark stammered to the official. "It's probably a prop. She's not herself." The official swiped the card on his portable machine. Beep. Approved. The machine printed a receipt. The official's eyebrows shot up into his hairline. He looked at Ilara with a sudden, terrifying respect. "Thank you, Ms. Vance," the official said, bowing slightly. "Would you like us to wrap the necklace, or will you be wearing it?" "Wrap it," Ilara said. It's not for me." She took the receipt and turned to the table. The Sterlings were frozen statues of confusion and shock. "You," Jessica stammered. "How?" "Credit card fraud," Victoria whispered, her eyes narrowing. "She stole it. That's the only explanation." "Mark, she's a criminal. Oh my God, the police are going to be here any minute." Ilara ignored them. She picked up her purse. "I'm going to head home," Ilara said to Mark. "I have a headache. You stay and enjoy the party." She walked out of the ballroom, the heavy velvet curtains swaying behind her. Back at the table, Richard was staring at the portable machine as if it were an alien artifact. "It went through," he whispered to Victoria. "It actually went through." "It's a mistake," Victoria insisted, though her hands were shaking. "Or a glitch. Or she stole it from a lover. We'll get to the bottom of this. Tomorrow, we demand answers. And if she can't give them, we cut her loose." Mark watched his wife leave. For the first time in 3 years, he realized he didn't know the woman he was married to at all, and a cold knot of fear began to form in his stomach. Little did they know, the auction was just the appetizer. The main course was coming at the gala, and it was going to be served cold. The morning after the auction, the atmosphere in the Sterling estate was less like a home and more like a tribunal. Ilara came down for breakfast, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt. She found the entire family waiting for her in the sunroom. Richard was pacing. Victoria was nursing a migraine with a compress on her forehead. Jessica was scrolling furiously on her phone, likely checking to see if the scandal had hit the gossip blogs yet. Mark sat with his head in his hands. "Sit down," Richard barked, not offering a morning greeting. Ilara pulled out a chair. "Good morning to you too, Richard." "Don't play games with us," Victoria snapped, pulling the compress off her face. Her eyes were bloodshot. "We've been up all night calling our contacts at American Express, Chase, and even the police commissioner. No one can verify that card." "Because it's a private invite-only issuer," Ilara said, calm, pouring herself coffee. "They don't have a customer service line for the general public." "Bulls, what?" Jessica yelled. "It's a fake. You bought it on the dark web to embarrass us. Or worse." She narrowed her eyes, a nasty grin forming. "You stole it, or you're sleeping with someone who gave it to you." Mark looked up, his face pale. "Ilara, is that it? Is there someone else? Because that's the only thing that makes sense. There is no way you have access to $200,000. You clip coupons for laundry detergent, for God's sake." Ilara looked at her husband. The lack of faith was expected, but the accusation of infidelity stung. "I didn't steal it, Mark, and I'm not sleeping with anyone. I have investments I've been saving." Richard let out a roar of laughter that sounded more like a bark. "Investments? From what? Your grammar-checking money? Did you correct a typo for Elon Musk and get a bonus? Don't insult my intelligence." He slammed his fist on the table. "Here is what is going to happen," Richard growled, leaning in close to her face. "I don't know how you tricked that machine last night, but the bill is going to come due. And when it does, Sterling Enterprises is not liable. I am drafting a legal document stating that you acted independently and fraudulently. You will sign it. And," Victoria added, her voice icy, "you will return that necklace. Immediately. We will claim temporary insanity." "I can't return it," Ilara said, taking a sip of coffee. "I already had it couriered." "Couriered? To whom?" Jessica demanded. "To your fence?" "To a shelter for domestic abuse survivors in Queens," Ilara said. "They're auctioning it off next week to fund a new wing. I donated it in the Sterling family name. I thought you wanted good PR?" The room went dead silent. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You gave away a $200,000 necklace. In our name? You said you wanted to improve your image for the Vance Global merger, Ilara said innocently. I helped. You idiot! Richard screamed, his face turning purple. If that check bounces, and it will be sued for fraud by the charity. You have destroyed us. It won't bounce, Ilara said firmly. Get out, Mark whispered. Ilara turned to him. Excuse me? Get out of my sight, Mark said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. I don't know who you are anymore. You're lying to me. You're jeopardizing my inheritance, my family's legacy, everything I've worked for. Go stay at the cottage. I don't want you in the main house until after the gala. I can't look at you. Ilara stood up. She looked at the man she had vowed to love. She saw the fear in his eyes, fear of his father, fear of losing his comfort, fear of the truth. Fine, Ilara said. I'll go to the cottage, but Mark, remember this moment. Remember that you chose to send me away. Just go, Jessica yelled, and take your junk car with you. Ilara walked out. As she reached the front door, she heard Victoria mutter, We need to check the prenup. If this fraud blows up, we need to cut the cancer out before it spreads. Ilara got into her rusted Honda. She didn't drive to the cottage. She drove 2 towns over to a secluded luxury hotel where Harrison Thorne was waiting in the presidential suite with a stack of documents. Did they take the bait? Harrison asked as she entered, handing her a glass of sparkling water. Hook, line, and sinker, Ilara said, her demeanor shifting from the meek housewife to the CEO of Vance Global. They think I'm a criminal. They're terrified. Good, Harrison nodded, because the trap is set. I've just received word from the bank. Sterling Enterprises missed their quarterly interest payment this morning. They are technically in default. Ilara walked to the window, looking out over the skyline. Don't foreclose yet. Let them sweat until the gala. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them desperate. 3 days before the gala, the panic inside the Sterling household had reached a fever pitch. Richard Sterling sat in his study, staring at a letter from Ironclad Capital. It was a notice of default. They had 72 hours to come up with $5 million or the bank would seize their assets, including the Hamptons estate. It's over, Richard whispered, pouring a scotch at 10 a.m. We're done. The banks aren't returning my calls. The investors smell blood. Victoria paced the Persian rug, her heels clicking like a ticking clock. We are not done, Richard. Pull yourself together. We have 1 card left to play. What card? Richard groaned. We have nothing. The Vance Global representative, Victoria hissed. They are coming to the gala. We know Vance Global is looking for a legacy brand to acquire. We are a legacy brand. If we can charm them, get them to sign a letter of intent that night, the banks will back off. They won't foreclose on a company being acquired by a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. But the audit, Richard said. Once they see the books. We massage the books, Victoria snapped. We sell the dream, Richard. But, she stopped, her eyes narrowing. We have a problem, a liability. Ilara, Richard said, the name tasting like poison. Exactly. If the Vance representative looks into Mark's background and sees a wife who is currently, according to our theory, committing credit card fraud, they will run. She is a loose cannon. She's unstable. She's plain. Victoria picked up the phone and dialed Mark's office line. Mark, get home. Now. We need to talk about your marriage. An hour later, Mark sat across from his parents. He looked exhausted. He hadn't slept since Ilara left. He missed her in a way, but the fear of financial ruin was stronger. "You have to divorce her," Victoria said, not bothering with a preamble. Mark flinched. "Mum, I can't just—" "She is a criminal, Mark," Richard shouted. "That check to the charity hasn't bounced yet, but it's only a matter of days. When the police come for her, do you want to be standing next to her? Do you want Vance Global to see you holding the hand of a fraudster?" "But the gala is in 2 days," Mark argued weakly. "It's too soon." "No," Victoria said, sliding a manila envelope across the desk. "It's perfect timing. These are separation papers. We've had the family lawyer draw them up. You will serve her these papers at the gala." "At the gala?" Mark was horrified. "That's cruel. Can't I just do it privately?" "No." Victoria slammed her hand down. "We need a public statement. If Vance Global sees you severing ties with the liability, it shows strength. It shows you prioritize the company over personal mistakes. You tell her it's over just before the keynote speech. Then you take the stage as a single man, ready to lead Sterling Enterprises into the future." Mark looked at the papers. He thought about Ilara, her quiet support, the way she made his coffee, the way she used to look at him. Then he looked around the room. The mahogany shelves, the oil paintings, the life of luxury he had always known. He imagined losing it. He imagined working a regular 9 to 5, driving a Honda like Ilara, struggling to pay bills. The fear won. "Okay," Mark whispered. "I'll do it." "Good boy," Victoria smiled, a predator satisfied with its kill. "Now call her. Tell her she's allowed to come to the gala, but only if she stays in the background. Tell her it's her last chance to redeem herself. Lure her in." Ilara was at the cottage, which was actually a charming, if slightly dusty bungalow on the edge of the estate, when her phone rang. "Hello, Mark," she answered. She was currently reviewing the acquisition contract on her iPad. "Ilara." Mark's voice was stiff. "Look, about the other night. Mum and Dad are stressed. I'm stressed." "I know," she said. "We want you to come to the gala on Saturday," Mark said. It's important to me. The family wants to make amends. Maybe we can start over." Ilara paused. She knew he was lying. She could hear the tremor in his voice. She knew exactly what was happening because she had tapped the home landline days ago. She knew about the divorce papers. "I'd love to come, Mark," Ilara said, her voice sweet and unsuspecting. "I want to be there for you. I want to see you shine." "Great," Mark said, rushing to get off the phone. "Wear something nice. Please. For once." "Don't worry, Mark," Ilara said, looking at the garment bag hanging on the back of the door. Inside was a custom-made gown from Paris that cost more than the Sterling's entire fleet of cars. "I'll wear something that reflects my true value." "Okay, see you there." He hung up. Ilara set the phone down. She walked over to the mirror. The plain wife, the grey mouse, stared back. But then she took off her glasses. She let her hair down. She straightened her spine. "Harrison," she said into her earpiece. "I'm here, Ms. Vance," her lawyer replied. "Proceed with the plan. Buy the debt from Ironclad Capital. As of midnight tonight, I am the Sterling family's creditor. I own their mortgage, their business loans, and their credit lines." "Understood. Shall I inform them?" "No," Ilara smiled coldly. "Let them find out when I take the microphone." The stage was set. The Sterlings were expecting a lamb to the slaughter. They had no idea they had just invited the wolf to dinner. The grand ballroom of the Sterling estate had been transformed into a palace of light and excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars dripped from the ceiling, casting a kaleidoscope of rainbows over the gathered elite of New York. Champagne flowed like water, and the air buzzed with the murmur of billion-dollar gossip. Richard and Victoria Sterling stood at the entrance, greeting guests with practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Internally, they were screaming. Every time the doors opened, they looked for a representative from Vance Global. "Do you see anyone?" Richard hissed through his teeth, waving at a senator. "No," Victoria whispered back, her grip on her clutch turning her knuckles white. "Just more vultures waiting to see if we collapse. Keep smiling, you fool." Jessica was circulating the room, showing off the emerald necklace Ilara had bought. "Yes, it's the tears of the ocean," she lied effortlessly to a group of debutantes. "Daddy bought it for me as a pre-celebration gift. We're expecting wonderful news tonight." Mark stood by the bar, downing his third scotch. The manila envelope in his tuxedo jacket felt like a lead weight. He scanned the room for Ilara, half hoping she wouldn't show up. If she didn't show, he couldn't serve her. He could delay the inevitable. But then, the room went quiet. It started near the entrance, a hush that spread like a wave, silencing conversations mid-sentence. The heavy oak doors swung open, and a woman stepped through. For a moment, Mark didn't recognize her. He squinted. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her frame like a second skin, cascading down into a train that shimmered with crushed diamond dust. The neckline was daring, exposing collarbones that looked like they were carved from marble. Around her neck was not the emerald necklace, but a choker of white diamonds, so large and brilliant they looked like captured stars. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was a cascading waterfall of dark silk waves. Her makeup was fierce, sharp eyeliner, blood-red lips. She didn't look down. She didn't look shy. She looked like a queen surveying a colony she intended to burn. "Who is that?" Richard asked, squinting. Victoria gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. It's her! It's the plain Jane!" It was Ilara. She walked into the room, and the crowd parted for her. She didn't walk with the skittish, apologetic gait she had used for 3 years. She glided. Mark dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one noticed. They were too busy staring at his wife. "She spent the money," Victoria hissed, her face contorted in fury. "She spent the stolen money on a dress. She's flaunting her crime in our faces." Jessica stormed over to Ilara, blocking her path. "What do you think you're doing?" Jessica snapped, though her voice was hushed to avoid a scene. "You look like a high-priced escort. Did you rent that costume? Take it off before you embarrass us." Ilara looked at Jessica. She didn't blink. She simply looked through her. "Hello, Jessica," Ilara said. Her voice was different, lower, smoother, commanding. "That necklace looks heavy. Does it weigh down your conscience, or is that weightless?" "You bitch," Jessica seethed. "Mark is going to end you tonight. Just wait." Ilara smiled, a cold, dangerous curve of the lips. "I'm counting on it." She moved past Jessica, leaving the scent of jasmine and ozone in her wake. She walked straight to the bar, right up to Mark. "Ilara," Mark breathed, staring at her. "You look incredible." "Do I?" Ilara asked, picking up a glass of sparkling water. "I thought I looked plain." "I never said that," Mark lied, sweating. "That was my mother. Ilara, listen. We need to talk, privately." "Not yet, darling," Ilara said, patting his cheek. "The speeches are about to start. You have a role to play, don't you? Your mother is watching." She nodded toward Victoria, who was making a slashing motion across her throat, signaling Mark to get it over with. "Right," Mark said, his voice shaking. "Right. After the speeches." "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice boomed over the microphone on the stage. "If I could have your attention." The room turned. Richard stood at the podium, looking every bit the titan of industry he pretended to be. "Tonight is a celebration of 50 years of sterling excellence," Richard began. "We have weathered storms. We have built skylines. And tonight, we are on the verge of our greatest chapter yet." The crowd applauded politely. "But before we discuss the future," Richard continued, his eyes locking onto Mark and Elara in the crowd, "we must ensure our foundation is strong. We must prune the dead branches to let the tree grow." A murmur went through the crowd. Prune the dead branches. It was an odd choice of words. "Mark," Richard said, "come up here, son." Mark froze. This wasn't the plan. He was supposed to do it quietly. "Go on," Elara whispered, nudging him. "Daddy's calling." Mark walked up to the stage, his legs feeling like jelly. He stood next to his father. "My son has a difficult announcement to make," Richard said, handing Mark the microphone. "But a necessary one, to show our partners at Vance Global, who we hope are here tonight, that the Sterling family values integrity above all else." Mark held the mic. He looked at the crowd. He saw hundreds of eyes judging him. Then he saw Elara. She stood alone in the center of the room, a beacon of blue velvet. She looked serene. Mark stammered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope. "I am announcing my separation from my wife, Elara," Mark said, his voice cracking. The room gasped. The shock was palpable. "You didn't divorce your wife at a gala. It was social suicide. It has come to our attention," Mark read from the script Victoria had written, "that there have been financial irregularities involving her accounts. The Sterling family cannot condone such behavior. We are cooperating with the authorities." He looked at Elara, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Elara. It's over. You're served." He held the envelope out toward the crowd, a symbolic gesture of rejection. Victoria smirked from the side of the stage. Perfect. Now the Vance rep would see they were clean. But Elara didn't cry. She didn't run. She started laughing. It wasn't a hysterical laugh. It was a soft, genuine chuckle that was amplified by the sudden, deadly silence of the room. "Financial irregularities," Elara repeated, her voice clear even without a microphone. She began to walk toward the stage. The crowd parted again, terrified and fascinated. "Stop her!" Victoria shrieked. "Security! Get her out!" Two burly security guards stepped forward to grab Elara. "I wouldn't do that if I were you!" A deep voice boomed from the back of the room. Harrison Thorne stepped out of the shadows. He was flanked by 4 men in dark suits. Richard froze. He recognized Harrison Thorne. Everyone did. He was the Shark of Wall Street. "Mr. Thorne?" Richard stammered. "What are you doing here? If you're representing her for the divorce, you're too late." "I'm not here for the divorce," Harrison said, walking up the stairs to the stage. He ignored Richard and walked straight to the podium. He took the microphone from Mark's limp hand. "I am here representing the new ownership of this building," Harrison said. "What?" Richard laughed nervously. "I own this building." "Actually," Harrison said, pulling a document from his briefcase. "As of midnight last night, the debt held by Ironclad Capital was purchased. The mortgage on this estate, the business loans for Sterling Enterprises, and the personal lines of credit for Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. They were all purchased by a single holding company." "Who?" Victoria screamed, running onto the stage. "Who bought our debt? We will pay them. We have a deal with Vance Global." Harrison smiled. It was a shark's smile. "You do have a deal with Vance Global," Harrison said. "In fact, the owner of Vance Global is here right now to discuss the terms of your foreclosure." "Where?" Richard looked around wildly. "Where is he?" Harrison turned. He extended his hand toward the woman in the blue dress standing at the bottom of the stairs. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison announced, "may I introduce you to the founder and CEO of Vance Global, And your new landlord." He pointed at Ilara. "Ms. Ilara Vance." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence where you could hear a heart break. Richard Sterling stared at Ilara. His brain refused to process the information. The grammar checker, the orphan, the grey mouse. "No," Victoria whispered. "No, that's impossible. She's nobody." Ilara walked up the stairs. The security guards, sensing the power shift, stepped back and bowed their heads. She reached the podium. Harrison stepped aside, bowing respectfully. Ilara stood in front of the microphone. She looked out at the sea of stunned faces. Then she turned to Mark, who was still holding the divorce papers. "You can keep those, Mark," she said softly. "I'll have my lawyers draft the real ones. Yours are terribly written. I spotted 3 grammatical errors in the first paragraph alone." Mark dropped the envelope. "Ilara, you're Vance Global?" "Vance is my mother's maiden name," Ilara said, her voice amplified through the hall. "My father was Elias Thorne, the tech magnate." A collective gasp ripped through the room. Elias Thorne had been the wealthiest man in tech before he died in a plane crash 20 years ago. His fortune had been left to an anonymous daughter who had disappeared into the foster system to avoid the press. "I grew up learning that money makes people cruel," Ilara said, addressing the crowd. "So when I turned 25 and inherited my father's estate, I decided to live quietly. I wanted to find people who loved me for me, not my net worth." She turned her gaze to Richard and Victoria. "I thought I found that with your son," she said. "But I watched you slowly poison him. I watched you mock me for my thriftiness, ridicule my plainness, and treat me like a servant in my own home. I stayed silent because I wanted to see how far you would go." She walked over to Victoria. "You called me a gold digger," Ilara said. "But for 3 years I have been the only thing keeping this family afloat. Who do you think anonymously paid off your liquidity crunch last year? Who do you think recommended the Novus Gen stock?" "You," Richard wheezed, clutching his chest. "You gave us the tips." "I tried to help you," Ilara said, "but you were too arrogant to listen. And tonight, you tried to humiliate me. You tried to destroy me to save your crumbling empire." Ilara reached into her purse, a small, elegant clutch matching her dress. She pulled out a piece of paper. "This is the deed of trust for the Sterling estate," Ilara said. She held it up. "And this," she pointed to a screen behind her that Harrison had just activated, "is the current balance of Sterling Enterprises." The screen flickered to life. "Balance, $45,000. Status, foreclosure imminent." "I own it all," Ilara said. "The house, the company, the cars. Even that necklace Jessica is wearing." Jessica grabbed her neck, looking like she was being strangled. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises," Ilara said calmly. "Except for you, Mark." Mark looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Ilara, please. I didn't want to do it. They made me." "I know they did," Ilara said, her voice softening for a fraction of a second before hardening into diamond. "But you let them. You're a grown man, Mark, and you chose your inheritance over your wife." She leaned into the microphone for the final blow. "So, Mark, you don't have 24 hours. You have 10 minutes. Get out. Now." Ilara turned to the crowd, her face shifting into a dazzling, business-ready smile. "I apologize for the domestic disturbance. The open bar will remain open for another hour. Please enjoy the night. I believe the hors d'oeuvres are paid for. By me." She turned and walked off the stage. The crowd erupted. Not in applause, but in chaos. Phones were out. Recording. The Sterling name was destroyed in seconds. Richard collapsed into a chair, gasping for air. Victoria was screaming at Harrison Thorne, who was calmly handing her an eviction notice. Jessica was trying to sneak out the back, but photographers were already blocking the exit. Mark stood alone on the stage, the divorce papers at his feet, watching the woman in the blue dress walk away. He realized, with a sickening clarity, that he had been holding a winning lottery ticket for 3 years, and he had just thrown it in the trash. 3 months had passed since the Red Wedding of the Hamptons, as the tabloids had gleefully dubbed the Sterling Gala. The fallout had been nuclear. The video of Mark serving divorce papers to a secret billionaire had gone viral, garnering 50 million views in 48 hours. The Sterling family didn't just lose their fortune, they lost their social currency. They were radioactive. Ilara sat in her corner office on the 45th floor of the Vance Global headquarters in Manhattan. The view was breathtaking, a sea of steel and glass glistening under the morning sun. She was wearing a tailored cream suit, her hair loose and glossy. She looked nothing like the woman in the beige cardigan. "Miss Vance," her assistant buzzed in. "He's here again. He says he won't leave until you see him." Ilara sighed, closing the file she was reading. "Send him in. 5 minutes." The heavy glass doors opened, and Mark Sterling walked in. He looked smaller. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a generic button-down that was slightly wrinkled. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked around the office with a mixture of awe and regret. "Ilara," he said, his voice cracking. "Hello, Mark," Ilara said, not standing up. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Sit." Mark sat, fidgeting with his hands. I appreciate you seeing me. I know you're busy." "I am," Ilara said. "I'm acquiring a shipping lane in the Pacific. What do you want, Mark?" "I wanted to apologize," Mark said, leaning forward. "I know I've said it in texts and emails, but I needed to say it to your face. I was weak. My parents, they got in my head. But I never stopped loving you. You have to believe that." Ilara looked at him with an expression that wasn't anger. It was pity. "You didn't love me, Mark," she said softly. "You tolerated me. There's a difference. You loved the idea that you were the savior, the successful husband with the charity case wife. It made you feel big. But the moment I became a liability to your lifestyle, you discarded me." "That's not true," Mark protested. "I was trying to protect the family. And that's the problem," Ilara cut him off. "I was your family, and you chose the people who mocked me over the woman who held your hand when you cried about work stress." Mark looked down. "We lost the house. Mum and Dad are. It's bad, Ilara. Dad had a minor stroke from the stress. They're living in a 2-bedroom rental in New Jersey. Mum is trying to sell her old designer clothes on eBay, but people are trolling her accounts. It's humiliating." "I know," Ilara said. "I bought most of them." Mark's head snapped up. "What?" "I bought Victoria's wardrobe," Ilara said calmly, "through a third party. I donated the clothes to a program that helps underprivileged women dress for job interviews. I thought it was poetic. Her vanity is finally being used for something useful." Mark stared at her, realizing the depth of her operation. "And me?" Mark whispered. "I can't get a job in finance. No one will hire me. They say I'm a liability. I'm working as a junior analyst at a firm I wouldn't have even looked at 3 years ago. I'm making 40 grand a year, Ilara. I'm drowning." "You're not drowning, Mark," Ilara said, standing up and walking to the window. "You're just living the life you would have had if you hadn't been born a Sterling. You're starting over. It's good for character." She turned back to him. "I'm not going to give you money, Mark. I'm not going to fix this for you." "I don't want money," Mark lied, though his eyes betrayed him. "I want another chance. Let me prove I can be the man you deserve. I don't care about the billions. I just want my wife back." Ilara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Do you remember the beige cardigan?" she asked. Mark blinked, confused. "The one Mum hated. The one I wore on our first date," Ilara corrected. "I wore it because it was soft, and I was nervous. You told me I looked cozy. You liked it then. But over time, you let them convince you it was trash. You let them convince you I was trash." She walked to the door and opened it. "I haven't changed, Mark. I still like comfortable clothes. I still like reading. I'm still the same person. The only thing that changed is the number in my bank account. And if that number is the only reason you're sitting in that chair right now, then we have nothing left to say." Mark stood up. He opened his mouth to argue, to beg, to scream, but looking at her, so poised, so powerful, so utterly out of his league, he realized the truth. He had lost her long before the gala. He walked to the door. He paused, looking back. "Did you ever really love me?" he asked. "Yes," Ilara said simply. "I loved you enough to hide who I was, just to be sure you loved me for me. And I got my answer." "Goodbye, Mark." The door clicked shut. Ilara walked back to her desk. She picked up her phone. "Harrison? Yes, Miss Vance? The Sterling estate, the renovations. We are ready to break ground on the luxury condos, ma'am. But what about the cottage in the back? The one you lived in?" Ilara looked out at the skyline. She remembered the cold nights in that cottage, the insults, the loneliness. "Bulldoze it," Ilara said. "Plant a garden there instead, something that blooms in the winter. Consider it done." Ilara hung up. She spun her chair around to face the view. She was alone, but for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't lonely. She was free. And the silence was golden. And that is the story of how one woman turned the tables on the people who underestimated her. It's a powerful reminder that true value isn't what you wear or what you drive. It's who you are when no one is watching. The Sterlings learned the hard way that when you judge someone by their appearance, you might just be insulting the person who holds the deed to your house. Now, I have a question for you guys in the comments. If you were Ilara, would you have given Mark a second chance? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? I want to see your debates down below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new drama every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, be kind, because you never know who you're really talking to.